everyone. Welcome to Plant Powered Business Strategies to Grow Your Positive Impact. I'm Brieanah, and I'm here with my friend Johanna.
Hi.
And our guest today is Kayla Kaplan. Hey,
Yay.
Kayla.
Welcome.
Kayla is a San Francisco-based food and nutrition nerd, self-proclaimed nerd, writer, published researcher, and curious vegan, known to the internet as Oy Vey It's Kay. Her food newsletter, where she writes about food system news from a curious vegan perspective. After earning a master's of science in food and nutrition policy and programs, Kayla was a nutrition communications expert for plant-based CPG food and drink brands and food tech startups, and she recently transitioned to a role in animal advocacy. Welcome, Kayla. We are so excited to chat with you.
Yeah, happy to be your nerd for the podcast.
So to kick things off, we always ask our guests, why veganism? Why did you decide to become vegan? What was the choice like for you?
Absolutely. So mine is like pretty selfish, I would say, which is not usually how people start their vegan journeys, but I was a freshman in college and I'd been vegetarian since I was 12 because in Hebrew school, our rabbi showed us the Food Inc. documentary to try to
Well,
the importance of kosher meat, and it scared me. And I was like, I'm never eating meat again, and I have not. So, and then I didn't really know a lot of other vegetarians or vegans, so it really wasn't like a goal, a progression thing. I was like, I'm vegetarian, I'm good, I'm 13, I know what I'm doing. And then I was, 18 turning 19, I was in a dorm and I loved cheese. I was severely lactose intolerant, but I like loved it. I was like a block of cheese, a little bite, that's my snack for the day. Too broke to have crackers. And then I just wanted to see if I could give it up. And I challenged myself to like do it for a year to just see if I like had this self-control, which isn't a super healthy mindset. But I did. And eggs went with it because they just started grossing me out the more I thought about it.
Yeah.
And after a year, I was like, I did it. I had a plate of dairy nachos. It made me so sick. And I have been vegan for 10 years since. So it became an ethical journey like very quickly after that. I started to seek out resources, but not until like 2 or 3 years into it, and then started really to put intention behind it and expanded it beyond diet to like lifestyle and the clothes that I buy and what I'm decorating with and all that kind of other stuff. And now I am like a notoriously still vegan person who everybody's just like, you're still vegan? Yes. Okay.
or you still get these questions like after 10 years.
Oh
It's
yeah. I keep a list. I actually keep a list. It's easier.
yeah. Yeah, people it's like people are funny sometimes I find like but yeah, cool. Thank you so much for sharing. It's so fascinating to hear the various stories people have. So you've been around for a while, like kind of having different roles in the vegan and like plant-based movement. And you're good with like personal branding, or it's one of your like expertises. So how do you, would be interesting to hear, how do you kind of approach marketing for yourself and building your personal brand? And like a second question, you have a Substack, so I would be really interested in hearing about that, how that fits in, and what made you start that, and how it's going. So,
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
a lot of questions.
Two great questions. I think personal branding is an accident. I have a bachelor's in human biology and a focus on human health and disease. And then I did food research at my university for a couple of years after I graduated. And then I went into a master's of basically food policy and applied nutrition. It was the mouthful that Brianna said up top. All science. But I loved to write and I like loved food, but until I like started doing research in food and I went to grad school in a food and nutrition program, I didn't really know that it could be a career. So I was kind of just doing this like Instagram thing on the side when it was fairly young. I didn't really have an Instagram until my friends were like, people just post food pictures. You should stop Snapchatting your like crappy images on there and like try to take better pictures and put them there because like stop Snapchatting them to us basically. And that was again like 10 years ago. And I was like, okay, let's try it. And I just started doing it in little restaurants in my tiny college town and having fun with that. And it kind of grew out of that as I learned the social media landscape. It was just kind of playing around. And then it kind of became this, you're talking about personal branding. The vegan thing was very strong for me, but as soon as I kind of started realizing that you can personalize your vegan practice and you can bring like your perspective into it, you don't have to be the like preachy baby vegan, you don't have to be the documentary person, you don't have to be like a certain type of way. I was able to put my personality into it. And it just kind of naturally shifted to nutrition because that's what I was studying and learning. That's what that's what I'm qualified to really talk about most. The food system is a really big part of it. But then also my like Jewish perspective, mostly culturally, because like those are a lot of the foods that I am veganizing, and sharing just kind of how I do that in a tradition where a lot of people don't think that you can do it animal free. And then a lot of people were like, you should maybe back away from the vegan thing because it's like pretty harsh and nobody really wants to hear that. And it's better if you say plant-based. And it got to that point. And I was like, I think I'm good with that. Thank you, but I appreciate it. Well, you're never gonna get the reach. It's too niche. And I was like, that's fine. And then all of a sudden, niche became a really great thing in marketing and branding. Like the mass appeal kind of thing, the very clean aesthetic on Instagram.
Yeah.
It kind of went away. But in 2016, 17, when I started, it was like, it wasn't that. It didn't seem to me to have as much of a niche. And so I kind of learned the branding over the process of being like, I like my perspective. My perspective's going to change, but I can kind of commit to that. Everything felt authentic and organic. And I really was doing it because I had no desire to be an influencer. I really wanted to do science communication. I really loved to write. And I kind of wanted to see if people liked what I had to say and how I was saying it. And then after grad school and after being laid off from a tech startup, I started my Substack. So kind of weaving the two questions together. And my Instagram name is Oy Vey, it's K. So it naturally kind of went to Oy Vey, it's a food newsletter. And I like that branding aspect because so many people are already being like, it's a vegan newsletter. And with Oy Vey, you can either be like, Oy, it's a vegan newsletter, or whatever it is, or Oy Vey, it's K again, So you can, if you're gonna be upset with me, at least you're gonna have my branding when you say it. Although I don't know if I can claim Yiddish as mine, but it's fun. It grew, and I love Substack because there's a lot more control than the social media algorithms have, and Instagram has just been so tricky over the last few years. And so I've really just started to prefer somewhere where I can focus on my content and it can reach people who want to go in depth and have nuance rather than like fight me in comment sections. So Substack seemed like a much better use of my time. It also has a longer character limit, and those little social media comments are not enough for me. So kind of the journey.
That's so funny. I've found myself being cut off by Instagram a lot recently, so maybe I need to explore Substack instead.
You got a
Um,
podcast, gotta get it out there.
yeah, exactly.
Time limit.
Since we like dove in a little bit on branding, and that's such a juicy topic, I'm wondering if with your experience in the plant-based food sector generally, if you have any thoughts on the mixed messaging that's coming up with the declining sales and companies are struggling, but then on the other hand, we see like alt proteins kind of booming. So it seems like there might be some branding issues, like we just saw Impossible come out with a big rebrand push, and now they're meat made from plants, things like that. So what do you think's happening with like branding and identity and like messaging in the sector?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, something like super in depth that I'm trying to figure out the answers to. So I will
Yeah.
say that my experience was primarily with really young startups in the plant-based natural food sector. And some of those brands are now, in Whole Foods nationally and doing expanding to a lot of SKUs. And it's really cool to see like these drinks that I was tasting at events in Boston are now in stores by me in California. And so I think that there's kind of a lot of separate journeys that you just brought up, which is really small, bootstrap, like people who are at farmers markets, who are doing vegan markets and pop-ups and like kind of getting in their scene and watching them grow locally has been something that I've loved to see. And those are people that are still deeply affected by everything with like everything that just changed in society with COVID, right? Making it a lot harder for small businesses to like get through because they couldn't get to people, making them really creative. And some of them did some incredibly innovative things. But I think we're seeing that shift. It was a huge boon for alternative proteins and for like bigger food companies and very techy food companies during COVID. They got a lot of investment. And then when that investment didn't seem to be like immediately a high return on it because legislation's not fully there and the regulation's not fully there. And there's a lot of people campaigning very heavily against alternative proteins, but also just the vegan food space in general with what we can say, what we can't say, and what needs to be an additional claim on it, gets tied up in courts, all that stuff. And so I think that there's a branding issue because a lot of these companies are now like, I think alternative proteins always had the goal to reach the masses, right? Like they were never interested in just vegans. Like we had Boca burgers, they were such, but we were still vegan, like, and and all the stuff that I've read said that their intention was to go big. And so I think when you're figuring out that branding, especially how consumers have shifted a lot, because I do think that consumers have gotten a lot more flexible, like as omnivores, or plant forward is a thing, or plant-based is a mass appeal in the marketing sense. And so I think that branding is kind of reflecting how they're trying to capture consumers, but also how those consumers' perceptions are changing. But consumer perceptions are influenced by the food industry so heavily, and by lobbying groups, especially in the United States, like, and a lot of other governments in Europe too are having a hard time like trying to regulate or ban cultivated meat sales and all that kind of stuff. So I think that there's this like very big system-wide shift that's happening. It's affecting what the companies can say on the package, what the consumers think they want to hear on the package or read on the package, and then how these like large rebrands are trying to go after that. We just saw that with Daya as well, who used a huge, like a really big ad agency to redo everything with the intention of being like, we really don't care about vegans. Put us on your cow burger. We knew that before Daya. I mean, I get it. You go after your side, but a lot of these companies are going to the point where they want to alienate some people to go after their target audience. And it's a strategy. It's a strategy. I don't know. What do y'all think?
Wow. That brings up so much of like the dialogue that I see on LinkedIn with thought leaders of if we're calling it plant-based, can vegans trust it? You see like true hardcore, vegans that want it labeled vegan. They want to know that they can trust the product. Like, okay, we're tired of reading ingredient lists. I get it. But at the same time, I totally hear what you're saying, that the goal is omnivores. And sometimes in order to shake them and say, hey, this is for you too, like we're not this niche product, you have to be as blatant as Daya was, right? You have to say things like Impossible is with we're meat, and then like little letters made from plants. Like, and that's gonna, like you said, alienate a lot of vegans. I know, like, we're recording this on June 4th, and last week, I think it was, Miyoko had this very long LinkedIn post shedding light on how, in her opinion, the vegan movement, plant-based movement had kind of lost its way, that corporations were after profit and growth instead of change. And I see where she's coming from, but at the same time, Kayla, you and I both worked in diet change, and every meal, every choice, every substitution matters in diet change work. So at the same time, I feel like there's a space in branding for it to not be one or the other. And maybe some of what we're seeing in this mixed messaging is them trying to find where that sweet spot is. And a lot of companies are choosing to overcorrect with very blunt language. And we'll see how the market responds to that. But it is an interesting time for sure, because this is probably, we've been saying this for a couple of years, but this is probably the most growth we've seen in the plant-based food sector in a while. right? And so it's all new. We don't know what to expect. Like, what will this look like in 10 years? What will the audience and the market tell us in 10 years? How will it correct? It'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it is interesting. And I also don't believe that vegan capitalism is going to like save us, essentially. I don't think it's going to,
Right.
I don't think it's doing anything revolutionary to shift us away from our current industrialized food system, the centralization of the food system, the consolidation from, excuse me, really large global conglomerates. Like,
Yeah.
we haven't seen it shift away from that. It's very hard for brands to stay independent. There are some incredible legacy brands in the space that have done it, but it's rare. And so I think that influences. It's not a separate food system, which in the media and kind of the LinkedIn posts that you see from people from either the very heavy pro animal ag side, or the very vegan side, or the very alt protein thought leader side. I think it's really clear that we are not in a separate food system. And I think maybe that messaging and that branding needs to reckon with that first. It's not just like different target groups of consumers. Like, we are all in the same food system, and vegans are traditionally getting their food all over the world from the same food system as everybody else. We're shopping in the same grocery stores, even though we would all love to have a local vegan market that we could go to that was affordable, that had all this stuff. But we're all in the same store. And so there are a lot of tactics that people are trying out, but ultimately grocery stores haven't changed that much either, right? The online space has a lot, and I worked in grocery e-commerce on the back end of things for product attribution to help people try to find what they're searching for online, however they're searching. But it hasn't changed that much. We have all this technology. We do have all these novel products and all these really cool brands doing things and having cool branding, and it's all still to get off of a grocery shelf and get into people's carts. It's to hook them. And so we haven't really gotten to go past that. And I think it's interesting that people want to see vegan more. Some people want to see vegan more, and I don't mind. But I think we all know vegan doesn't really mean anything on a label.
Nope.
I picked up vegan kimchi from grocery outlet in December that had fish in it, and that was a labeling error. That was a complete labeling error. I went back and forth with the company.
Oh, good for you. Wow.
It wasn't a full recall because but it's not a regulated term, and it can be misprinted, and you have to check. But I brought that home because I saw a vegan.
Right.
I saw that it was on sale. I love kimchi. I put it in the cart. I brought it home. I turned it around, and there's fish in it,
Wow.
which for me is less of a big deal. I'll give it away. If I had an allergy to that, because it is a major allergen, we would have a problem. And so there's also mistakes happening. And I don't think that discussion of like what we want to see or we don't want to see is coming back down to, and this is connected to like the same food system, the problems we have with allergen labeling in the United States.
Yeah.
That it's so like ballooned that it's not super clear. It's made in the same factory as, okay, does it share equipment? Is there like air contamination? How is that helpful to somebody with a severe food allergy to know that it's generally around like rubbing shoulders with foods that they can't eat? That's not a helpful thing. So that person, if they have to be really safe, they're not going to buy it. Very similarly for vegans, right? Like we all have exactly what we want to see to be able to trust a product. We know that trust in institutions is going down. So it's not like we're like, yeah, FDA, tell us what to eat, because a lot of people don't follow that.
Yeah.
So we all have very specific things we want to see on the label. And I understand wanting to see vegan. I think third-party certifications are like can help us get there, but aren't fully transparency. And so what I think that we all in the entire food system, however you eat, however you identify, I think we all need to push for greater transparency. I'm glad that we can see vegan products saying milk and butter. I think that's a huge jump in progress for us. I'm also a regulatory nerd, a little legislative nerd. So I love following that labeling stuff and seeing the fragility of the animal ag industry. But I would so much rather never see the word vegan on a package again. If you could tell me exactly what was in it, what it was sourced from. Don't make me look up what your lactic acid came from or your vitamins. just kind of, if you could just tell me and the problem is a lot of these companies don't know. So even if you take on that burden as a consumer to go and ask them, they'll tell you they don't know. It's a different co-packer here and there. You can't guarantee the sugars, bone char free, right? I feel like we've all kind of, if you have the time and energy to kind of do that stuff, you try, but we can't get there yet. And so that's my little kind of, if I'm niching down into my little take, I would so much rather we push for greater transparency in all aspects of our food labeling and food sourcing and the food system,
Yeah.
so that we can make informed choices that are best for us as an individual and not just like blanket, this is what vegans want.
Yeah.
I'll get off my pedestal on that one, but
Loved it. No, loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that it's such a good point, and like transparency in food system in general, like it's such a huge topic, and I mean, we are like where we are, and people are so far removed from understanding how food is produced because there's no transparency. Like, so yeah, such a good point. Going back to kind of more marketing and copywriting. So you're a writer, and like I checked out some of your writing. You're a great writer in my opinion, and you've also worked as a copywriter. How did that happen? Like what drew you to copywriting? Yeah.
I thank you for checking out my work. I'm always embarrassed. I'm like, oh, you. I don't really know. I think it just became like that's an avenue that people will actually pay you to write.
Mm.
There's not a lot of opportunity. I'm not a really quick journalism person, so getting into like news wasn't really for me. So I've written a couple pieces in vegan magazines. It's not very lucrative in that either. And I started doing this in grad school when I like really needed money, but I found that I could work with other brands, and I specifically kind of went into that plant-based, natural, for whatever that means, CPG industry, because I knew how to talk about that food. I was already doing it to friends, coworkers, whoever asked me a question because they overheard me at a restaurant being vegan. They heard that I studied nutrition. So I'm already having a lot of those conversations. And I found ways to effectively communicate that, because we all said, like, we can have the list of vegan questions. I know what you're going to ask before you ask me, and I know what answer I'm going to give you, and I know how you're going to push back on it. And so I think having those conversations that we all have in our daily lives, it made sense to just kind of put that into copy, or at least be informed by that when I'm doing it. And it was really trial and error. These small brands took a chance on me. I did some kind of like unpaid work or collaborations to see if I was good at it. And I helped sales. I helped people with their pitches if they were going to pop-ups and markets. And that kind of just made its way to like working with an agency and doing the copy for launching for websites, taglines on products. And I'm really the target consumer of a lot of those products. So I was like, what would I want to see on it? And hoping to bring a little bit of integrity to it with a nutrition background, knowing what claims I can make, having taken some classes and some training on nutrition claims, which I would love for more food marketing teams to kind of be educated or go through any kind of course, or to hire a nutrition communications professional. Because for me, I found that it wasn't that hard. We don't have to kind of lean into the harmful like stereotypes and perpetuation of misinformation and disinformation just to sell people a product. Like, we can sell it and it can look cool and it can be fun and also truthful. And so that's kind of how I fell into it. And then my Substack is like my commitment to longer. It is not optimized for SEO. It is not optimized. It's not optimized for anything but my brain, I felt like, but people seem to enjoy it. So that's how I kind of relax from the copywriting, because I think it is I think you both know, it's like a very specific formula. It's not, there's a lot of creativity that goes into it, but it's mostly about form and function.
On that, would you have some like quick copywriting tips, or like some like wisdom to part from your from your experience to our listeners who might be, well, like vegan business owners?
I would say get somebody who has, or find people who you can source diverse feedback from. Learn how your copy is going to hit when different people read it, because we all bring our different cultural backgrounds, it might be like, that sounds fine to you. In this group of people, you're going to come off like that. Or talk to different, if you're specifically in the vegan space, talk to the different kinds of vegans so that you can at least anticipate their reaction. It might not impact the copy that you put out there, but when we say like, this is effective copy for whom? And it's usually the algorithms. It's not effective copy for people, it's effective for the internet. And I know that there's a lot of great strategies that are in that, and we can't get away from that if you want to be successful. But I do think that it's really helpful to that's how factor in diversity throughout it, right? And to seek it out before it goes on shelves, before it gets onto the internet, so that you can, again, anticipate this stuff and at least be doing it with intention. And that also includes like sourcing it to people who, if you're talking about farmers on your website and it's all about regenerative, talk to farmers, right? See how it comes off to them. Does it accurately portray the people that you are trying to represent? If you're a direct trade company, right? What do the people that you're working with on the other end of your like your sourcing, what do they think about how you're talking about them? I think that there's some respect that needs to go in a lot of different directions, which might be like not a quick copywriting tip, but that's what I have found that made it effective, because again, I drive with authenticity and trying to be, again, truthful, and we can impart some of that transparency in our copywriting by just like committing to good information, packaging in a way that like we know will do well in SEO, we know will do well on shelves, on packaging, all that kind of different stuff.
Such a good answer.
Oh,
It's so important to make sure that you're actually resonating with your target audience. Gosh, I know Johanna and I will jump on these calls, and before we record, we'll spend a few minutes just venting. Sometimes if there's a campaign that just absolutely missed the mark or did a different strategy that we're like, oh man, why didn't they test this? How did this get through? I know many marketers, many copywriters will have their own pet peeves. Do you want to share any of yours or an example that you've seen recently of something that you're just like, oh, why?
Well, first of all, I want to be privy to some of those. I would love to hear what I call
We should start recording them, Johanna.
behind a paywall, recorded behind a paywall.
There you go.
This is where you create a Patreon. Little pet peeves. No, I think that there are a ton of little pet peeves. I'm gonna be a little repetitive. I just can't stand seeing nutrition science taken apart and repackaged to fit a product. Or especially if that science, if you can go and look it up and it's like on a foundation of an industry funded study. And it's kind of like what headlines do when they talk about science is, oh, this product is going to shorten your lifespan by 10 minutes. And you read the study and it's like, that's not, how did you get there? And so I think when I see that, and because marketing claims and nutrition content claims are so popular and they're done, they have a specific formula, they have to be very specific. And so what I've seen is kind of a reaction to the greater regulation of claims, which I am for, but they'll start to pick other words that don't have a ton of meaning. And then like we get clean. We get another word that is a very popular descriptor that nobody can tell you what it fully means. There's not, there's no like universal, this is what it means, unless there's a certification, but then you have to read all the entire content. It doesn't mean anything. So it's hard for me to see fluffy words on packaging, knowing that like you're just trying to appeal to what people are hearing on Instagram. And it's just kind of this feedback loop of people using buzzwords. This is what we want to hear. This is what consumers want to hear. Well, consumers heard it from you. Who actually wants to hear it? What does it mean? So to me, it's that like it's the fluffy stuff that we know people want to see, but like let's do fluffy better. At least put it on your website. That's part of your labeling, right? Your copy on your website is included in your food labeling. It's not just what's on your package. It's not just on whatever product you're selling. Your labeling's on there, and you have a lot of opportunity with websites, with social media to educate people on the words that you're using. And so if that word, I'm going to stick with clean. If that word clean is important to you, tell people what it means.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I don't
So
know how we're writing words with no meaning.
Yeah.
So that will get me every time.
Yeah, I was at this new food conference in Berlin, Germany, well, a couple of times already, but last autumn, and one of the we were like they were talking about like trends in the plant-based sector, and one is like, yeah, clean food, and it's just like, yeah, it's clear, but like, yeah, what does it mean? Like, and
You didn't drop it on the floor before you put it in the package. No dirt. We brushed.
yeah, and also like a side note, but not really like a side note, like I think there's something really problematic like with the idea of like clean versus dirty food to me, like in general, like it just doesn't, like the vibe there is strange to me. So yeah.
yeah.
I think you hit something really important though, is because when we use that word, right, especially if it's a word that doesn't have a clear definition or meaning, what's the flip side? You know, and we know that in marketing, well, it's a greater serving of X nutrient than whatever. Okay, you need to tell the than. That's like a requirement. You have to be able to tell me what it's greater than. What is the benchmark? And we're not doing that with marketing copy language, where it's like, okay, it's clean. Is it cleaner than your last product? Is it cleaner than another company's product? Is it cleaner in a like a very specific pesticide sense, like cleaner than what is, and
Yeah.
what is dirty? You have to be able to tell me both, because if there's a fair trade product, there's also an unfair trade product. And I would like to know more about what the difference is and why I'm allowed to buy an unfair trade product or a dirty product, which again, it doesn't really mean anything, but like, I want you to be able to tell me that. And again, if you will push these companies on it, your copy's on your website, if it's on your labeling, I'm going to ask you, because I have too much time on my hands sometimes, and they can't usually tell you.
Wow.
And all you have to do is hire a nutrition informed person or a regulatory informed person, which can be really difficult for small brands. But I think that that would really help you in the long term, because you have so few words to hit people and to really be punchy. You might as well make them count.
Totally agree. Well, and it helps build trust too. Something we talk a lot on here about is that marketing is really at its core helping you build a community of steadfast purchasers, of customers, of supporters, whatever word. Like we're talking about picking the right word, right?
Yeah.
But whatever you want to call your audience members, we're trying to build trust with them, build a relationship with them so that they trust you. And so the more transparent you can be, the more you can explain us versus them, your mission of why you went to the left when everyone else is going right. The more trust you build with them, makes a stronger brand and probably helps longevity of your brand overall.
Yeah, and probably helps you get sued less, hopefully.
That's always the goal. That's always the goal. Well, and speaking of, Kayla, like let's flip this. So we talked about pet peeves. I'm wondering if there's like a success story that comes to mind, like a brand that's super transparent, that builds that trust, and you're like, oh, they are doing it right, that our listeners could go to for inspiration.
Yes. Okay. So when people ask, it's when people's like, what's that song? And it just pops out of your head. I'm like, I can't my whole brand. No, I think that there are a lot. I tend to stick to smaller local brands, which is not going to be super helpful for a national or global audience. But I would say look to the people in your community that haven't quite made it out yet, who are literally, they know exactly who they're talking to because they're at the farmer's market talking to them. They know exactly what their customer wants, because people tend to be very vocal when they're talking to you face to face. And if you're growing within your industry, I was in the entrepreneur space and food entrepreneur space in Boston for my time during grad school. And I was really, it kind of shifted. It's what got me interested in entrepreneurship and food production and CPGs, because I was talking to these people who were so passionate about their products. And so rather than like naming a specific brand, because trust, right? They all change, and I could love them today and next week, I don't know. But I do think that those people who are smaller and who are still really committed, who are so driven by a mission and driven to I have a health problem, my kid had this health problem, so I created this product for them, for people like us, and I'm doing it because I care deeply, they do it really well. And so I think that those examples are also so often overlooked and are like listicles of like 10 best brands or 10 brands with the best packaging or like what a trendiest new products. And they all, these trendy product lists, they all tend to come from smaller producers, people who are punted into like ethnic food category, because again, our traditional grocery stores have not made room for them. And I think that it's really cool because they have they can't be there without their audience. And so if they mess up, like they don't have an audience, they don't have a business, and we see that too. But I think that people who are consistently at the farmers market, who are now selling in local coffee shops because they were finally able to get their package on stores somewhere, it's not Whole Foods, but that counts. I think that stuff is really cool to me, and it's easier to find because you can go to your local, hopefully if you're in an area where you have access to like a food community and not just a corner market or grocery store, you can kind of get to know your local food producers, which bridges the gap to transparency because you can ask them where they get their stuff and they will usually know better than a big company, and they tend to not waste words because they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I love that so much. It's such a good reminder, like support your local farmers market and small plant-based brands, everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any brands that you've been loving lately, either of you?
Oh
Or any
gosh.
friends?
I mean, this is the complete opposite, but like, I mean, like I love Oatly for their marketing. Like I just have to mention this, like, okay, there's a lot to be said about Oatly in like one or two directions, but like they have these huge posters here in Europe, like because there's the European parliamentary elections now, and it's going to be it's probably like the biggest election or the most meaningful because of the rise of the right wing and like the future of like, you know, nature, climate crisis, everything. So they have these posters saying vote, like as in oat,
Nice.
so like promoting themselves, but also yeah, like I do like them, but Bree, I let you take over here while I think about like a local small brand.
No, I'm glad that you brought up Oatly. I know that's always a favorite of ours.
I do think that they shifted in the space too of like you can be vegan and you don't have to, it doesn't have to be the nice, like everybody loves us, we want to be as nice and whatever as possible. That's like a super, we're talking about niching down. That brand voice is so recognizable. It's really effective. It's very niche, and people, you get your reactions, which helps you on social media, which helps you in Google. Those campaigns are so like, it's a campaign where either you see so many like kind of cool ads when you're passing by a bus stop or whatever, but it's not always recognizable of who it is or what they're selling. But Oatly does both, I think, really well, where they catch your eye and you know their branding is so strong globally. So I think that's a really cool example.
Yeah, and I think another one in that vein that has a really recognizable voice and brand that comes to mind for me is Slutty Vegan.
Nice.
Everything Pinky does is just like so on brand. You know it's her. You know, like talk about trust. You know what to expect every time she posts. You know that every location, every account that they create per location is going to have the same brand identity, the same values, the same voice. So their customers become raving fans because they come there for entertainment, for good vegan, fast vegan food. It's accessible. And talk about bringing in new voices to the movement. And no, we could go down this rabbit hole, Kayla, because I've gone down it with you before. But especially in the US, veganism tends to be whitewashed in a lot of ways. And so voices from women, minority-owned businesses tend to get lost in the noise, but Pinky has disrupted that. And I really, really admire how she built her brand so quickly, and how she resonated with people and built out a sector of the movement that was being ignored by this larger, mostly white section of it, at least in the US.
For vegan fast food, absolutely too. And I have never had the privilege to go, but I've always wanted to. And I think that Slutty Vegan also has a reputation that was built on their food being really good. I know a lot of restaurants, especially I'm from LA, and a lot of restaurants in the LA area that are so popular on all the vegan lists. I don't think they deserve the reputations. I'm happy for them. I am not personally going to go out of my way to spend money there. So it's very interesting for me to see people who I think have really strong branding, really strong social media presences. They know what they're doing. They know who their audience is. It's all very recognizable. I don't think their food matches up. I think there's that's to me, I'm not picky, but I think I have a little discerning palate because I like to cook. And so I don't like to get stuff out that I feel like I could make better. And
Totally.
maybe that's me conflating my non-professional chef abilities, but I think that Slutty Vegan is one that like has a reputation where people are like, the food is so good. The branding, spread it, but the food, I've never heard a negative review of it.
Yeah.
So
They can
that's,
back it up.
yeah. And I think a brand in this space, I want to talk about like longevity and also kind of representing like minoritized voices is Dr. Bronner's.
Oh,
which a brand that isn't exclusively food, but let's talk about a brand that is recognizable without reading. You can see it from colors. You can see it from like, even no matter what product they create, it's Dr. Bronner's, and it's been Dr. Bronner's for what, like 100. I mean, it's a very long time, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a family-owned business to this day. Their branding to me encompasses their company values because I've never worked for them. I don't know anybody that works directly for them, but I know the employee benefits that they give, right? With like childcare and free vegan lunches and like they're getting into like psychedelic therapy for their employees and like really cool stuff. They talk about their pay scale and their pay ratios from executives to like factory workers and everybody in between. And that's a brand to me too, that's doing the branding really well, strong, very committed to their values. They know who they are, they know who their audience is, but they haven't relaxed their like commitment to their ethos and their commitment to how their family started the business. And they're starting to get into food. And it's like, well, I've always kind of wanted to see what your soap tastes like because it smells so good. So and it
If it tastes like the chocolate, then we're in for a good surprise.
and you get to, and you know that the chocolate was made because they were like, we have an excess of this product. I think it was, I want to say palm oil. Where can we put it? Chocolate. Right. And there's not a lot of brands that I trust, but I would say that I trust Dr. Bronner's, and I've been buying their soap forever. You know, they're somebody who I think I would be so disappointed if any of that ever shifted, but I kind of have faith that it won't. And I think that what they do, it's a very unique voice. And I think that that's super cool to have wrapped up your branding, your voice, your marketing with your company values and making it more transparent than another brand I could think to name.
Moving on from like marketing, you're working in like animal advocacy these days. You still have your own business on the side, if I understood right, but like what made you move to advocacy?
Yeah, so it was kind of born out of need. So like I said, I was very unemployed for 2 years and kind of started. It's a really, really hard time to find a job in my little nutrition communication space, not for lack of trying, but I kind of turned to the brands that I've like known and love, or companies or organizations, and started to do some contract work and figure out kind of like what I was good at, so that when I was applying to full-time roles, because in the US, it's fairly important to have a full-time job so you can have, you know, healthcare. And I started kind of doing that, and that's how like the copywriting business got up, and you know, going to events and helping people pitch their product and going to conferences. And I really loved that. And I do consider, so like my writing business is my like my biggest side hustle. It's been on pause because just had life things going on, and I finally let myself like take a break. But I got into the advocacy role because I was doing work for a nonprofit as a contractor, and I was doing their social media management. I was helping them with copy, and just content management in general. And eventually that turned into a full-time offer, which is very rare for nonprofits to be able to do that. And so I feel really lucky, and it's in a space that I feel like super supported. And as much as I love working in the vegan food industry, I really do feel like this is my little niche within the niche within the niche. of like caring about animals, representing like my Jewish identity, culture, and values because it is a Jewish organization, and also being able to like do work at a systems level, at a community-wide level that feels like very impactful in a way that I haven't really seen from other places. And so it was just a normal social media management job that kind of grew into something where I get to learn every day and I'm excited. And I do feel like I can see the difference that I'm going to make. And I'm not like looking for the next client necessarily. But I'm still doing, my writing on the side and trying to keep my own personal creative outlets that are, a very small but income stream. But it is really cool to have a full-time job where I like feel fulfilled at the end of the day. And so getting into this space is so new to me, especially full-time, but I feel really excited and hope that I can stay there for a while, depending on, how everything goes. So far, they like me. So
They love you. I think I can speak for them. I saw Jonathan at Ava, and I can say that he's still very happy. I just want to jump in real quick and emphasize what you said about having a full-time and still pursuing other projects on the side. A question I get a lot from other copywriters that are in this space or want to branch into working with nonprofits or plant-based businesses, whatever it may be, are one, is it doable? But then two, how? And can you mix and match and have a full-time job and still do this work and still make an impact in the movement? And so for our listeners, especially, I do it too. I work full-time and I have freelance clients. And while it's stressful at times, a little behind the scenes note, I was just telling these two lovely ladies that I was very stressed with a freelance client on top of my normal workload. So it comes in waves, y'all, but it is absolutely possible to have a broad impact and have the security of a full-time job and still dabble with freelance clients, still build a business of your own. Everybody's journey looks different. So just find what works best for you.
yeah, that's a great message.
Wow, I feel like we could talk to you for at least another hour, but we're slowly running out of time. Where can everybody listening to this learn more about you, like follow you? Yeah, time to share your socials. You did mention your Substack, but yeah, I mentioned
Yeah.
it.
Thank you. So my Substack is Oy Vey. It's a food newsletter and it's on Substack. Or you can find me as Oy Vey, it's K, pretty much anywhere on the internet. I'm loving Threads these days. That's been a fun new little platform for me. They're starting to put analytics there, so we'll see once the novelty wears off. But yeah, anywhere on the internet, I'm Oy Vey, it's K, or you can find me. Yeah, that's pretty easy, and hopefully I'll be getting back to doing some more content soon. So definitely subscribe to the Substack if you want to stay up to date on news in the vegan food space and the non-vegan food space. I have stuff to say.
We'll put a link to it as well under the
Yeah.
video for anyone that just wants to click. Please do support Kayla and all that she's doing. Also, if you have questions for any of us, we're happy to put your contact there, Kayla. So if that's Instagram, I can link Instagram, whatever platform you prefer people reaching out to you if they have questions and want to chat with you directly. But thank you so much for chatting with us. This, like Johanna said, we could keep going and continue to nerd out on all these wonderful topics. But we so appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you from me too. This was just wonderful.
We will see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.